Well, hello, my name is Andrew Cardno, and after a lot of encouragement from my business partner, Dr. Thomas, actually from Casey Gonzalez, the great podcaster, and a lot of really close friends, I've decided to do a podcast called QCI Pod, and this is the first one. And in this podcast today, I'm going to tackle one of the most interesting topics in the whole industry, which is around optimizing Freeplay, what it really means, how do you do it. It's going through an article that I just published on Indian gaming on this topic, and I'll take you through that, talk about it, and give you some perspective to what I wrote about when I wrote that article for Indian gaming and what it means. This podcast is going to be the first of many because I have an ambitious plan to do a podcast, one for every chapter in the book, The Math That Gaming Made. And The Math That Gaming Made it is now 700 pages and 100 chapters. It's probably going to take years for me to get through all these different chapters and talk about them, but that's the plan. We've got so much great material and so many great people that I worked with in doing that, and I think the opportunity to bring that to life in a podcast is very special. I will be doing that over the next few years. So let's get into optimizing Freeplay. So here I've brought up the actual article on Indian gaming, optimizing Freeplay, balancing displaced revenue and incremental visits. I do have a second page up with the book, The Math That Gaming Made, which is the 12th book that I've written with Dr. Thomas and Professor Singh. 18 years of writing. It's on Amazon.com. Just make sure you check out the editions page here and choose the color edition. For some reason that is a little bit mysterious to me, Amazon seems to have made this the cheapest version. It's also by far the most important and best version. And I really thank all the editors and authors and people that helped us get this critical body of work now to its final point. Back into displaced revenue. Freeplay here I'm using in its most generic term, meaning any kind of incremental free time on the device where the casino is paying for that time on device. It could be match play or free play or promotional credit. There's many different names for this thing, and different names in different places in the world, and whether you're slots or table games. But the essence of it is that you, the operator, are giving your players a chance to play on the operator's money. And it has become, I think without a doubt, one of the most important tools, if not the most important tool in database marketing in the industry, and has defined a whole generation of tooling on how you can optimize it and set it up. Because it's actually very difficult to optimize your free play, to really know at what level of free play you should be giving people. Is it driving incremental revenue? I'm going to take you through that now. Here's the real question. And when I first did free play, I think it was year 2000, I was working with Rowan Craigie back in Crown Casino in Australia, and he said, Andrew, you've got to tell me, am I cannibalizing? Gosh, it took me a long time to answer that question, right? It really did. Probably the best part of 10 years before I really understood this. And in the end, it's quite simple, and we'll take you through it, how you figure out the cannibalization. But it is a very, very important question. So free play can cannibalize your existing revenue. So if you give out enough free play, people have done this, actually accidentally, they've given out way too much, and people come into the property and they literally, the players will spend none of their own money because they've got plenty of free play. They don't need to. I've seen many things, in the hundreds and hundreds of marketing campaigns that I've been involved in, if not thousands, all sorts of different trials and errors and different ways of doing it. But the real question is, did the revenue that we gave out, that was generated by the free play, displace bankroll? And the second question is, did it drive an incremental visit? Because when you drive incremental visits, normally that's incremental revenue, and it makes the free play much more profitable. Now, there is an enormous amount of debate around free play. It's quite remarkable that something that seems to be used continuously in the industry by everybody in the industry is doing it, and yet there's just so much debate about how much we should give out and how we should cost it. I've seen all sorts of costing models. I actually continue to find examples of people who do some pretty strange mathematical things with Freeplay, like for example take the amount wagered and remove Freeplay as a dollar amount from the amount wagered, which creates a very unusual measure of amount wagered, where amount wagered removing Freeplay, because Freeplay is recycled, so you really have to think through the math to how to do that correctly. So let's talk about the core dynamics, and then this example I have here in the article. Let's say you imagine a guest who typically brings $200 to play electronic blackjack at a resort, and you provide the good guest with $100 in free play. Okay, so we have a guest, they normally spend $200, we give them $100 in free play, and then they come in, and in the first scenario they come in and they spend the $100 in free play and $200 of their own money. How much money did the resort make? The resort made $200. It's pretty simple. Now it gets a little bit more nuanced when you say, okay, now the guest only spends $100 of their own money. In this case, the resort made $100. You've displaced half of the revenue of that guest with free play. And that's a classic example of free play cannibalization. You can look at that carefully, you can figure that out. That's something you really need to dial into in your business to understand the amount of free play that you're giving out and how much cannibalization that's bringing about. Because that's the true cost. That's where you determine the cost of free play. The cost of free play is the amount of revenue that it displaces. So now we've looked at these two examples and we say, well, hold on, but in the second example, maybe it was an additional visit. Maybe instead of going to your competitor, they come into your location. Well, that means that you've made an extra $100. Leaving your competitor aside for a moment, that's incremental lift. And that's the critical thing that free play does. Free play, I've seen time and time again, is a driver of visitation. Visits are the most important way of getting incremental revenue in your property. So in this case, if the free play that was given out, the $100, brought about an additional visit, you've made an additional $100, so it didn't displace any revenue. So once again, the free play is in fact free. And you're going, at this point, you're going, well, wait a minute, it displaced $100 of the actual play of the customer. It's like, yeah, okay, it did. So how do we know? Well, this is a real dilemma. How do we know how much money we've made when we give out free play? So the best answer, and just about the only answer that I know to this, I've tried some very, very sophisticated models. I've tried all manner of different methods, and it all circles back to one thing. You just can't beat the scientific method. It allows you to consider all other factors like the weather and competitive changes and all sorts of things that could influence it, and say, okay, all other things being equal, we can see test versus control. We can isolate the impact of the change and measure the lift. So how do we go about doing that? Well, the first thing we do is we take our customers and we put them into buckets, into similar groups. Why do we do that? Why do they have to be similar? And they have to be similar because we're going to do something to them. We're going to subject them to a test. And it doesn't make sense if they're very diverse in their behavior inside that bucket, because then we're experimenting on a very diverse range of behaviors. Now you can do it, but you just need really big buckets with lots and lots of players in it, and you're probably going to get lost in the noise. When you dial it down to a very cohesive bucket of the similar kind of behavior and you run a test and control experiment on it, that's when you see the effect of your free play. That's when you see your experiment. When you have a similar bucket and you run an experiment, you say, gosh, I can see these similar behaviors of customers and how one of them has changed afterwards. The other reason is when you're giving out offers, you want to give out the same change to all the players. And if the players in the bucket are very different, you can't give them all the same amount of promotion. And this is one of the really big differences with gaming database marketing versus other industries. In gaming, the spend of a player is their choice. It's a choice of how much you spend. And I always like to think about sitting down at a blackjack table and asking myself, what does it cost me? What's the price? How much do I spend on this game? And I could sit there on a minimum bet of $50 and spend $200 a hand or $50 a hand. It's my choice. So when you look at changing behavior, it's really important to understand that the players are choosing the price of their gaming experience. This is almost unique. And maybe lottery is the same, maybe horse racing is the same, but it's almost unique. And in the world of economics, when you talk to economists, they talk about, micro adjustments in price, and here's how it can change things, and they get very excited about it, and they are, of course, correct. It's a brilliant thing to look at. Now we walk into the gaming world, we say, the first thing we're going to say is there is no price because the customer chooses the price. Imagine if a retailer did that. A big box retailer said, today we're going to remove all the prices and the customers can come in and they can pay whatever they want to pay for any product in the store. Now you can be pretty sure that people will be paying 1 penny for every product in the store, but that's not what happens in a gaming facility. In a gaming facility, the players can choose to spend more because they want that extra level of excitement. Putting people into groups of similar behavior is essential because that is how we can isolate those spending choice behaviors. Then we take the group and we split it in half and we give them 2 different offers or 2 different treatments. There are many other ways of doing it, but why half? Why not go 20%, 80%, just do a little test? And the answer is the gaming data is very concentrated in these buckets that are often very small in number of people. When you split it in half, now you can do other numbers, so it's not a hard rule, but it's a good rule of thumb if you split it in half, because that's the optimal level to get the best possible statistical measure of the result of your program. Which is what you need. You need accuracy of results. You want to be able to say, I ran this test and control, and statistically, here's the outcome. Here's why it was important. After I've run the campaign, then I need to do something else. I can measure the output. But one additional thing I need to be able to do, I need to be able to repeat it. Building in repeatability of your marketing programs is absolutely critical. So you've got these 2 groups, Group A and Group B. You've done a test. You've figured out Group B was the most effective. So you now need to be able to repeat Group B in a reliable, robust way, time and time again, because that's how you can drive incremental profit from your experiment, because you've learned about the right level of the right kind, the right level, the right promotional offer to give that Group B. You've learned that it's going to outperform Group A. Over time, if the repeatability of these programs and the collection of the data about the core groups and how they behave becomes one of the core and critical assets for analytics in your business. So that it's, instead of it being an activity that I took, it's a well organized curation of data that allows you to repeat the experiment, to do things again, to adjust stuff, and to know again next month, what am I going to do? What am I going to change? What experiments am I going to run for next week? And again, continue to curate and manage the data. So what's some of the pitfalls? First, probably the one of the hardest things is we have a very skewed distribution of spend in a gaming facility where there are very small numbers of people generating a large portion of the revenue. This is very typical. And And in those groups, we can end up with quite small sample sizes. And on top of that, we get a lot of change in behavior from one month to the next. While we may have stability in our overall business, which is very common with a gaming operation, the individual membership of each group can be very, very volatile. People change their behavior all the time. It's very common. Especially you got to think about from the player's perspective. Players are winning, losing, and winning jackpots and playing for long periods and not getting anything. They're on a very wild ride. While we tend to think of them as the statistical average, which is completely wrong. We've got to understand our players are gambling and we're gambling with them, and a lot of the times they win, and when they do, they will change their behavior. They might spend up, or they might spend down, or they might take a break. But this very high level of volatility combined with small sample sizes creates a lot of challenges with setting up your groups, which means simplicity matters. You actually want to have less buckets so you can have larger groups, so you can get to that statistical test, like the t-test, where you're testing the significance of your results. Are these valid results? Third challenge here is short test windows. How do we get long enough to know that it really worked? Allow enough time to catch up multiple visits, really understand whether it worked or not. You might run the test over a couple of months. Why not? That means you've got to have repeatability of program, and you've got to maintain the groups. This is very difficult because group membership could change and you're still giving out offers. So there's a lot to think about now when you start thinking about multi-month, multi-cycle test and control experiments. Crossover contamination in today's world has become a real issue because people seem to talk about their Freeplay offers on Facebook and Instagram and all these clubs that they belong to where they communicate with each other about how to get the best offers out of us. Wow, goodness. Like, we give out one offer to one group and a different offer to a different group. They are going to talk to each other, and that confounds the results. This is not good. Scientifically, right? It may also be a management challenge, but scientifically, when the groups are now interfering with each other, and you really got to think about how you can isolate them in such a way that doesn't happen. Very tricky problem. Finally, there can be really big external events to look at, and like a large concert, a massive bad weather effect that changes certain people in your group differently to others. Maybe in bad weather, people who are nearer to your property sort of stay more, right? Keep coming, and ones further away just can't. Well, unless your test and control has been very carefully set up, may well blow up your experiment. So what's the alternative? What are you moving past when you move to test and control? You're moving past the ad hoc analysis. I'm doing a forecast based on last month, and this is what this group of customers are going to make based on last month, and I'm saying my test and my marketing program has given me a 3% lift. Here it is. Well, that's called a pro forma. We should all do them. Really important because they let us plan the likely outcome of our promotion, but they don't allow us to determine the impact of change, because you've got no way of really knowing, did it work or did it not work? The only real way of doing that is test and control. Here's a way of doing it. Segment your customers into buckets based on worth metrics, for example, average daily theoretical, and set your objective. Are you looking to drive additional gambling behavior, additional coin in? Do you want to increase net revenue, which should normally be your goal? Your normal goal should be, I want to increase my net revenue. Keep your control groups clean. Choose a timeline that makes sense to get meaningful data. And then when you get the results, really look at it carefully. Apply statistical tests and let the math tell you, did this work? Was this effective? Or did I just cannibalize my business? Then iterate and refine. Running an experiment that didn't work is great, because then you know. You said, what about the other way? It's like, oh, well, I know the control works. All right, control don't change. Okay, that's good. That's better. So every time you do an experiment, unless it's indeterminate, which it could also be, but it's actually less likely, you always learn something about how to make your business better. one of the two scenarios is likely to be better than the other. So long as you set it up properly. A whole lot of caveats on that. But you're building this constant iteration on improving and refining your marketing program, building up a database, building up knowledge, building up information that allows you to continually refine what you're doing so that you can really get the maximum out of this incredible tool. So here's the bottom line. Freeplay has, I think, become, I think is the main marketing tool in a gaming resort today. And it can displace wallet, and it can reduce profitability. So it's one of the most important areas to examine carefully, to measure carefully, and to know, am I driving incremental revenue? In many cases, the Freeplay reinvestment level could be 20% or 25% of the total rated revenue of the property, of the total known customer revenue of the property. That could be your largest outgoing cost. It's massive. So this is something you've really got to tame. If you've got a business that's doing, I don't know, $10 million a month, and $2.5 million in Freeplay is being redeemed, that is a massive expense. Now, very important, it's driving the business, critical marketing activities. So then you look at it and go, wow, in the scope of things, the Freeplay may well be a larger expense than my labor force. Like, this is something we really need to look at. It's something we need to optimize, because it is one of the best levers to pull to drive your business. It's one of the best levers to control to bring profitability to your organization. Thank you for going through Pod 001, optimizing Freeplay with me. I'm really looking forward to putting this series together. I'm looking forward to the next pod, really getting into the Math of Gaming Made, the book, and tackling all those chapters and getting the story out there of all this huge body of work that we've put out now around the core pragmatic math models that is used to optimize and run a gaming facility. Thank you very much.